everyone, just itching my eye. I thought I'd do a video this week about another video about what we're talking about in clinic this week. So each week there's kind of a running theme with what I talk to my patients about in the clinic. So this week we've been talking about suffering. The reason this has come up is because I've been teaching my clients a specific network breathing technique called SRI. So there's 12 stages to SRI, and it stands for Somato-Respiratory Integration. So at the moment, most of my clients, we're starting at stage one, and the stage one, what stage one is marked by is suffering. Okay, so it had the question about, it brought up the question about what is suffering, and and all the things that we have around the idea of suffering. So the thing is, suffering is different from pain, okay? So pain is just a sensation, but suffering is a feeling that something deep inside is incredibly wrong. It's a feeling of hopelessness. It's a feeling that this will never end. And suffering is actually, it's an important part of the human experience. Without suffering, we can't have all the other really good feelings. So there's a couple of things that came up this week when we started talking about suffering. So the first thing that came up is when we were talking about suffering, I said to patients that, the first thing we need to do with network and with SRI, with stage one SRI, is to admit that we are suffering. And one of my patients actually said to me, she said, yes, I understand that. But it helps to remember that, people have it worse off than we do. And I sort of pulled her up on this because I think that is an incredibly dangerous statement to say, my suffering and my feelings aren't valid because somebody else has it worse. So the thing with this is that everybody's experience is valid. So nobody's suffering is more valid than anyone else's. Just because somebody lives in a different country or has different problems to us, it doesn't make our suffering more or less valid. So that idea that I am not allowed to suffer and I am not allowed to feel and I'm not worthy of suffering and my suffering is not valid because other people have it worse than me is an incredibly dangerous statement because it minimizes our suffering. So your suffering is just as valid as somebody else's suffering. Nobody has a monopoly on suffering. And whether you're suffering, and we talk about this it happens with children a lot. So when children have really deep emotions and they feel that something is inherently wrong, even if it's that they've got different socks on. To us, we look at that and think, oh my goodness, that's not suffering. But to them, their experience, it's valid, it's true. So to minimize their suffering and say, don't be silly, you have no idea what's going on, your suffering's not valid because this isn't really a problem. So that starts an incredibly dangerous cycle as we grow older, saying that unless you have a huge, massive problem like a relationship breakdown or you're on the verge of homelessness or you have nothing to eat, those things are valid suffering. But anything else, anything other than catastrophic, dire situations is not true, proper suffering. And that's not okay. So if somebody's never experienced those kinds of things, it doesn't mean that they've never experienced suffering. It just means that their suffering is different. And different doesn't mean wrong or bad. So the first thing we need to understand is it doesn't matter what the suffering is. It just matters that everybody suffers and everybody's suffering experience is different and all of those are valid. So the second thing that came up when we talked about suffering was that a lot of people don't want to feel it, okay? So I always say that, all emotions, all feelings are part of the human experience, right? So, love and joy and pain and sorrow and suffering are all part of the human experience. So when people are frightened of suffering, when they're frightened to feel anything negative, what they do is they tend to shove it down as much as they possibly can and put it in a little box. Well, here's the thing though, if you put all of your bad feelings into a box, right, it doesn't mean that you're going to experience heaps of good feelings all the time. What probably is going to happen is you're going to start shoving those good feelings into a box as well. And so what will happen is, instead of you just not experiencing bad emotions, you actually stop experiencing all emotions. So if you don't, so I always say that, we holiday in our emotions, okay? So you can holiday in happy emotions and you can holiday in your crap emotions like suffering and pain and sorrow as well. So if you think about holidaying, right? If you go to holiday in France, for example, what are you going to do? You're going to immerse yourself. You're going to really enjoy it and you are going to be there in Paris. So why don't we do the same with our emotions? Why don't we really holiday in our emotions, okay? So why don't we really holiday in suffering and in sorrow? It's not about always wanting to feel the right things, and it's not about holding yourself a pity party and I shouldn't be feeling like this, because that's bullcrap. Like if you want to experience happiness, you need to experience sorrow as well. And so one of my patients I was talking to, we were talking about gratitude, and she was saying, I find it really, really hard to experience gratitude. And I said, I completely understand. I feel the exact same way. And the reason for that is because a lot of females do this, a lot of people do this, is that we shove down our emotions so much just to keep going, I just got to keep going, just push that down, just put a lid on it, nothing to see here, and off I go. So when we do that with our negative emotions, eventually what will happen is, because we're so used to shoving everything down, we shove those positive ones too. So we go to, so then all these people say, feel gratitude. And when you feel gratitude, your life is going to be so much better and your brain's going to be rewired and everything's going to feel great. And so we go, fantastic, yes, I should feel some gratitude. And so every day we take our 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever, and we sit down and we go, I am so grateful. But we feel nothing. And what we start to do is we start to say, all right, I'm going to feel gratitude, but we're doing it like ticking it off a box, like we brush our teeth or go to the toilet or like get dressed in the morning. It becomes just something that we do, not something that we actually embody and feel and internalize. So I'm not a big fan of faking it till you make it. When it comes to our emotions anyway, I don't believe that you should just try and feel gratitude until you do it. I really believe it's about tuning into what you need at the time and honoring what's in there. Because one, you cannot feel one emotion. You can't just always feel happy. You can't just always feel sad. You will always feel all different emotions. So, actually feeling into it and understanding that feeling sad and feeling depressed and feeling your suffering is normal and it's a human experience. And we shouldn't try to deny that human emotion of suffering, because sometimes we all feel like nothing works. We all feel like it'll never end. We all feel despair. We all feel like we're at the bottom of a hole. And that's okay. It's okay to feel those things. It's okay to wallow. It's okay to really holiday there and feel that emotion, because once you start feeling that terrible emotion, you allow yourself to be heard, and you allow yourself to be held, because nobody wants to be talked out of their feelings. Nobody wants to hear, just buck up, you'll be all right. Just keep going. It's not that bad. No one wants that. What people want is to be held and understood, and to have the space to feel what they feel. So why do we deny ourselves that? I believe it's a lot to do with society, and a lot to do with saving face, and a lot to be with the idea that we seem to think you should feel like you're playing with a puppy all the time. And that's just not true. Like chemically, your brain cannot function having one high level of serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin and all those happy hormones, because the more you do that, the happier you are, the more your brain goes, oh, well, that's just our new normal. And the more you get addicted to these great chemicals, and the more that you're going to need to feel happy. So you will feel kind of, like level most of the time. So this is the thing. So the first thing I believe in the stage, towards your healing is to acknowledge that you suffer. To actually sit down and take the time and go, you know what? I do. I suffer. My suffering is valid. My human experience is valid. What I feel inside is valid. My thoughts are valid. And the more we start to validate and listen and actually hear ourselves, the body just ends up going, it breathes a sigh of relief. It says, I've been heard. I've been understood. Like, it's okay. And that's all anyone wants, is to be heard and understood, and held and allowed to work through their feelings. So, it starts off with being kind and understanding ourselves, and admitting that, yes, sometimes nothing works. Sometimes I suffer. Sometimes I feel powerless. Sometimes I feel helpless. All of those things are okay. It sometimes takes a little while for us to hear these things and to work them out and to tick through them and find what really resonates with us. But we all suffer, and admitting that we suffer and admitting that our suffering is valid is the very first stage to healing. So suffering is what we've been talking about in clinic this week. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about suffering. Yes. So please leave me a comment if you have any thoughts on anything I have said. And otherwise, I will see you again next week, probably Thursday lunchtime, which seems to be the time I feel the light's nice in my office and it's quiet, and it seems to be the time I like to do a video. So I'll see you next Thursday. Have a great week, guys. Bye.